Welcome to the Solid Signal Podcast for the week of September 16th, 2013. This is the first time I'm saying for the week of, and so let me explain. Longtime listeners of this podcast, well, as long as we get since this is only our first year, will know that the podcast comes out on every Tuesday morning. However, in order to get that done, I have to actually produce it on Monday and submit it to iTunes on Monday because it takes up to 24 hours for them to actually accept it. At the same time I submit it to iTunes, I also submit it to YouTube, and since I have more YouTube subscribers than iTunes downloaders, I decided to just kind of call it for the week of. Long story for not a whole lot of interesting stuff, huh? But it does tie into the theme of this week's podcast, which is patience and practice. I've been doing this podcast for not quite a year, and I've gotten better at it because I practice it every week. And I've got the patience to know that I'm going to keep improving it. These are kind of abstract things to think about until you realize it's tailgate season, and you've got a dish to set up every weekend. We all love football, and there's nothing that's more fun on a fall morning than setting up that dish, getting your tailgate set up all ready, having your friends over, meeting new friends. The only hitch is, of course, you have to set up that dish, and it's not as easy as it used to be. It used to be, they'd get that round dish and you get everything you needed. Sure, you can still do that, but you don't get high definition. Everybody wants high definition. For high definition, you got to get one of those multi-satellite dishes, and they're harder to aim. You have to tilt them in addition to just finding the right compass heading and the elevation. It takes a little bit of time, it's confusing, and it doesn't work with just one of those El Cheapo satellite meters, as it were. You got to really have a meter that knows what it's doing. We've produced some tutorial videos on this, we've got some printed guides on it, but the most important part is practice. If you get good at it, you'll get that dish in a close enough kind of setting in about 10 minutes. Sure, it's not going to survive a rainstorm or snowstorm, but for a day, you should be able to dial it in pretty close in that 10-minute span. It's not bad, but it does take practice, like I said. Practice a couple of times before you tailgate. Really try to get used to it, and a great tip is to try to mark the tripod so that you know where north is, and so you put the dish together the same way every time. That's just going to speed things up. When you finally get to Sunday, every minute that you spend setting up that dish is going to seem like an hour to people who really want to be watching the pregame show. So, you get practiced, you get polished, and you get a few bragging rights to all your buddies who've tried to set up satellite dishes and couldn't do it as well as you can. While you're practicing, it's also a great time to figure out if you've got everything you need and if everything's in good shape. Is that cable looking good? No kinks? No oxidation? What about that satellite meter? Are you still using one of those ones with the little needle that goes across? They don't work so well for high definition. That's why Solid Signal has the Sat Look Light meter, which is really great for doing everything that you're going to need to do for tailgating. Also super inexpensive, about as inexpensive as you can get for a real digital satellite meter. I've got one last request for you, our Solid Signal podcast listeners. If you haven't liked Solid Signal on Facebook, this is the perfect time. I'm trying to get up to 1,000 likes because Facebook really starts to promote you internally heavily if you've got over 1,000 likes. And Solid Signal's Facebook page is at like 965, so this is the perfect time to ask you guys to just make that final push. Tell your friends to like Solid Signal. Facebook.com/SolidSignalCom, or search for Solid Signal within Facebook. That's about it for this week. If you have any ideas for a future podcast, click that orange Suggest a Topic button on the upper right-hand corner at blog.solidsignal.com. I'll see you again next week for another podcast for the week of.